Hi everybody, and welcome to this week's standard deck, Dimir Flash. This is a deck that I have found to be really well positioned. It's done really well for me on the ladder recently. And one of the things that I've noticed is that there are a ton of Gyruda decks running around, which sort of rely on resolving a 6-mana creature. And there's also a lot of Lurrus decks on the ladder. And I'll talk about the game plans versus both of those decks, as well as just the overall deck tech for this deck. I want to start out in the 1-drop slot. We have 4 Spectral Sailor. This card, obviously good in the control matchups, gives you something to do with your mana if you're holding up counter magic and they do not cast anything. But also, it's got a really great synergy with the Sea Dasher Octopus. I have found very frequently I turn 1 Spectral Sailor, and then at the end of their turn 2, I mutate in the Sea Dasher Octopus onto the Sailor, and we start drawing an extra card per turn as we hit them in the air. We've also got a nice suite of 2-drops. We've got Brineborn Cutthroat, Cunning Nightbonder. This is a card that does obviously decrease the cost of some of our spells and gives them the ability to not be countered. But it's a card that I've been going down on in the numbers. I've been sort of unimpressed by it. I think in the final version of this deck, I will end up at 0 Nightbonders, but I am still tuning a little bit. We've also got 2 Essence Scatter and 3 Heartless Acts. So one of the things that's nice about Dimir Flash is, unlike the Simic Flash decks of last season's Standard, this deck can play from behind. Heartless Act is a very powerful removal spell at instant speed, and it gives you the opportunity, if your opponent does resolve a creature, to be able to remove that and then continue our game plan of countering all of their other stuff. We also have 4 Brazen Borrowers. This very similar to Heartless Act. We can bounce a permanent that they do manage to resolve and then counter it on the way back down. It also plays really well with the next card I'm going to talk about, the Slitherwisp. So this card right here, to me, is the biggest draw into Simic Flash. And I had to do a double take when I read this card's text box because it is quite powerful. So not only do you get to draw a card whenever you cast a spell with Flash, but also each opponent loses 1 life. When I first looked at this, I assumed that we would be losing the life, but that is not the case, so you can even incidentally pressure your opponent's life total with a Slitherwisp out. One of the ways this deck does get hosed is by a Teferi. So the next slot of 4 Mystical Disputes makes that a lot less likely to happen. We've also got 4 Neutralize. I've been super impressed with this catch-all counterspell, and the ability to cycle it for 2 has proved relevant on many occasions. Last but not least, I've got 1 Voracious Great Shark in here. If you have a Nightbonder out, this card is quite reasonably costed for its effect. It is a little bit on the expensive side when you don't have the Nightbonder out, which is why I'm only playing 1 of them. But similarly to how Frilled Mystic is able to both counter and then start pressuring the opponent, the Voracious Great Shark does the same thing in this deck. I do want to go over the mana base a little bit. We've got 1 Castle Locthwain and 1 Castle Vantress as a way to use our mana if we are not having to counter something. And we also have 2 Zagoth Triomes. And we have this for a couple reasons. Obviously, it does fix our blue and black mana, but if you draw it later in the game, you can cycle it and get a new card. So it does serve a couple roles. I didn't want to go up to all 4 of them. It is a bit clunky, but I think having 2 of them really makes the mana work a lot better, especially with cards like Brazen Borrower, which is pretty intense on the blue mana, and then Slitherwisp, which is intense on the black mana. In the sideboard, we are set up really nicely against what I perceive to be the current metagame. The aforementioned decks, Gyruda and Lurrus, both heavily rely on bringing creatures out of the graveyard, so 4 Grafdigger's Cages really puts a stop to that game plan. We've also got 4 Aethergust, still a ton of awesome green and red spells in Standard, so having the ability to bring in 4 of these is really nice. We've got 2 Keep Safe, decks that are playing removal against our creatures. This can be a really big swing if you are able to protect a creature with a Keep Safe. Oftentimes the Slitherwisp is the one that you are looking to protect, although sometimes the Sea Dasher Octopus. We've got the last Heartless Act for the creature-heavy decks, and 4 Thought Erasures for the more controlling matchups. As I said, I found this deck to be incredibly well positioned based on the early Ikoria metagame, we're going to jump into a traditional standard event and hopefully get a mix of different matches so we can see the gameplay and how it plays out. I hope to see you in the next video. If you enjoyed this deck tech, please consider a like and subscribe below, and I will see you then. Bye.